From the tallest spire of the Grand Council chambers ceiling hung a single shimmering crystal, a symbol of peace and dominance that had once held deep meaning. Now, however, it merely cast a soft light over a discussion drenched in tension. The council room, once a place of order and diplomacy, was now thick with unease as the subject of humanity was brought to the table. "They cannot be trusted," a towering blue-skinned ambassador from the Elorian Empire hissed, his voice slithering through the chamber like venom. His narrow, slit-like eyes darted from one council member to the next, gauging their reactions. "Humanity is too chaotic, too unpredictable. If we allow them near this conflict, we risk tipping the balance in ways we cannot foresee." Several heads, scales, and eyes of various shapes, sizes, and species nodded in agreement. The humans had once intervened in a small territorial dispute years before, and the council had never forgotten the chaos they'd wrought. What should have been a minor battle between two factions had turned into an unpredictable mess once the humans had arrived. Their ingenuity was disarming, their tactics brutal. No one wanted to risk it again. "The humans will stay out of this," the council's leader declared, her voice calm but carrying the weight of finality. Lozanna, a being whose entire form was made of shimmering light, flickered as if to emphasize her point. Her form fluctuated between hues of gold and blue, making her seem almost celestial. "We've kept them neutral for a reason. They lack the restraint required to navigate the complexities of our war." Another murmur of approval swept through the council. The consensus was clear: humanity must be kept far away from the brewing conflict. It was too dangerous to let them get involved. Humanity had a reputation for unpredictability and aggression, traits that the galactic powers found unnerving. Their potential to disrupt the balance of power was too great a risk to take. But back on Earth, the story was quite different. On the outskirts of human-controlled space, Captain Juno Oren stood on the bridge of her ship, the Valkyrie, staring intently at a holographic map of the unfolding war. Her hazel eyes narrowed as she traced the path of recent alien skirmishes that had crept dangerously close to human colonies. The Galactic Council had assured Earth that humanity would be left out of the conflict, yet here the war was, inching closer to the outer fringes of human space with every passing day. The holographic display flickered, showing the position of human outposts and colonies, dozens of them, perilously close to the edge of the Pora Collective's territory. These colonies, established by human pioneers, sat like fragile islands on the border of an alien sea. Juno's jaw clenched as she considered the implications. She had seen this play out before, and she wasn't naive enough to think the council would keep its word. They had made promises, but promises, as far as she was concerned, were worth nothing in a galaxy at war. Juno Oren was no ordinary captain. A war hero turned diplomat, she had spent years fighting on the fringes of human space, always the outsider in the galactic theater, always underestimated. The alien powers had long viewed humanity's adaptability as dangerous. They weren't wrong. It was precisely that adaptability, along with their unpredictability, that had allowed humans to survive in a galaxy that often sought to crush them. Beside her, Lieutenant Mason, her second-in-command, scrolled through recent intelligence reports. His grizzled face, marked by years of conflict, was etched with concern. "Pora convoys have been spotted passing through neutral territories again," he said, his voice low and grave. "They're getting bolder." Juno didn't respond immediately, her mind heavy with the weight of Earth's precarious position in the galaxy. Humanity had made great strides in the last century, expanding its reach to distant stars, building alliances, and proving its worth on the galactic stage. But no matter how far they'd come, in the eyes of the Galactic Council, they would always be the wild card. Too unpredictable, too dangerous, too human. "They're using us," Juno finally said, her voice cold. "The Council's too busy fighting amongst themselves to enforce their own rules. They see our colonies as convenient collateral." Mason grunted in agreement. "The Council won't care until one of those colonies gets flattened. They'll call it unfortunate, and that'll be the end of it." Juno knew he was right. The Council might be happy to keep humanity on the sidelines for now, but when the fighting finally reached Earth's doorstep, they'd do nothing to help. It wasn't just the physical threat that bothered her, though. It was the political maneuvering, the way humanity was being sidelined, left out of discussions that could determine their very survival. But humanity had always been more resilient than the Council gave them credit for. Juno herself had led human forces in smaller conflicts, always underestimated, always proving the aliens wrong. They thought humanity's wild nature made them unpredictable, and in some ways, it did. But it was precisely that adaptability that had kept them alive in a galaxy that didn't care whether they lived or died. As she stood there on the bridge, her mind raced through the possibilities. The Council had made it clear that humanity wasn't welcome in this war, but the war had other ideas. Alien skirmishes were edging closer to human space every day. The question wasn't if humanity would be drawn into the conflict, it was when. And when that time came, Juno knew they'd be ready. "We can't wait for them to come to us," Juno said quietly, her tone hardening with resolve. "We need to prepare our defenses now. Strengthen the colonies, increase our patrols, and if they keep pushing into neutral space, we'll push back." Mason nodded, his face grim. "And if the Council doesn't like it, they'll just have to deal with it," Juno replied. "We're not here to be their pawns. This time, we make the rules." With that, she turned back to the holographic map, her mind already plotting the next steps. Humanity might be the wild card, but that was exactly what made them dangerous. They wouldn't wait to be invited into the conflict. They'd be ready when the time came. And when it did, they'd remind the galaxy why they were not to be underestimated. The war was spilling into human space, and Captain Juno Oren knew that her people would be the ones paying the price. She had seen it happen before, the dismissive, almost callous way the galactic powers dealt with lesser civilizations. To the Aoran Empire, to the Lex sovereignty, and even to the supposedly enlightened Sharion Union, humans were nothing more than tools, useful when necessary, expendable when not. It was a harsh reality, one that had long been ingrained in Juno's mind from years of watching humanity being pushed to the fringes of the galaxy's politics and conflicts. And she was tired of it. Tired of being seen as expendable. "We have to protect our own," Juno said firmly, turning away from the glowing map of space projected before her. Her voice carried the weight of a decision long overdue. "I won't let this war destroy our colonies while the Council turns a blind eye." Lieutenant Mason, her second-in-command, gave a tight nod, his grizzled features reflecting the same steely determination. "What's the plan, Captain?" Juno's mind was already working, strategizing, calculating the odds. She knew the humans didn't have the vast, technologically advanced fleets of the galactic powers. They didn't have the ancient weaponry or the limitless resources that empires like the Aorans and the Lex wielded effortlessly. But what humanity had, what had always set them apart, was their adaptability. Their ability to think on their feet, to fight dirty when necessary, and to use every advantage, even those the enemy didn't know existed. And above all, there was one thing the Galactic Council always underestimated: humans never fought by the book. "We'll start with the forward outpost on Vega 9, Juno said, her voice gaining momentum as her plan began to take shape. "If the Poth are operating in that sector, we'll intercept their supply lines, hit them where it hurts." She glanced at Mason, her hazel eyes burning with resolve. "But we'll keep it quiet. No grand gestures. No declarations of war. Just enough to remind them that they can't waltz through our space without consequences." Mason's eyes gleamed with approval as he caught on to her line of thinking. A covert operation. Just like old times. Juno allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Exactly. We won't engage the Council directly, but we're not going to sit here and let them use us as a buffer." Her voice hardened, her words carrying the force of her decision. "If they won't protect our interests, we will." As Mason left to brief the rest of the crew, Juno lingered by the map, her thoughts still churning. The Valkyrie wasn't the most powerful ship in the galaxy, but it was fast, maneuverable, and, most importantly, it was hers. The ship had seen its share of battles, and so had its crew, a team of former soldiers, hackers, and engineers, all of whom had lived through impossible odds and come out the other side stronger for it. They were some of the best in Earth's independent peacekeeping force, a ragtag but fiercely loyal group dedicated to defending humanity's scattered colonies on the fringes of galactic space. Juno knew that if it came down to it, they would fight again. They would take on the impossible, just as they had before. But as much as her resolve hardened with each passing moment, she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling deep in her gut, the unsettling sense that this time they were dealing with something far more dangerous than what they had faced in the past. She had fought aliens before, and she knew how most of them thought: logical, methodical, and, above all, predictable. But the Poth were different. They were ruthless, driven to desperation by their war with the other factions of the Galactic Council. And desperate enemies were always the most dangerous. One wrong move in this operation, and the entire war could come crashing into human space, dragging Earth into a conflict it had no business being a part of. Juno exhaled slowly, steadying herself. No matter the risks, she knew one thing for sure. Humanity had been left out of the galactic chess game for long enough. They'd been the silent outsider for too long, ignored until it suited the needs of the more powerful empires. But not anymore. Now, they would make their move. The steady hum of the Valkyrie's engines thrummed beneath her feet as the ship prepared to jump to Vega 9. Outside, the stars stretched on in an endless, indifferent sea. They cared nothing for the brewing storm that was about to break. But Juno Oren wasn't indifferent. She was ready. Ready to show the galaxy that humanity would no longer be sidelined, no longer be treated as pawns in the games of the empires. The Valkyrie slipped out of hyperspace with a quiet grace, its cloaking systems active, rendering it a mere shadow against the stars. Juno stood on the bridge, watching as the distant outline of Vega 9 loomed into view on the horizon. The planet wasn't much to look at, a barren, rocky world orbiting a dim sun, its surface marred by craters and ridges. But strategically, it was a key location, lying just within the sector where the Poth were making their moves. "We've arrived, Captain," Mason reported from his station, his fingers dancing over the controls as he monitored the ship systems. Juno nodded, her focus unbroken as she studied the planet below. Vega 9 wasn't just an ordinary outpost. It was a critical link in the Potha's supply chain. If they could disrupt the flow of resources there, it would send ripples through the enemy's war efforts, perhaps even forcing them to reconsider their incursions into human space. "Keep us in low orbit," she ordered. "We need to stay hidden until we're ready to strike." As the crew set to work, preparing for the mission, Juno's thoughts drifted back to the council chambers, to the dismissive voices of the alien powers who had so casually written humanity off. They thought humans were too chaotic, too unpredictable to be trusted in their delicate, carefully balanced conflict. But they were about to learn just how hard it would be to keep humanity out of their war. The Valkyrie was a shadow now, but soon enough, they would strike from the darkness. And when they did, the Galactic Council would see what happened when humans stopped playing by the rules. The position along the Poth supply lines made Vega 9 a crucial strategic point, and recent intelligence reports indicated that Poth forces were using the outpost there as a staging ground. But staging for what? No one knew for sure. Beside her, Lieutenant Mason studied the readings, his brow furrowed with concern. "Looks like they've ramped up security since we were last in the sector," Mason said, his tone low but tense. "More ships patrolling the area." Juno Oren glanced at the display screen, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the data. Mason was right. Several Poth cruisers, long and spiked like armored predators of the void, hovered ominously around the planet, casting jagged shadows across Vega 9's already darkened atmosphere. Even from this distance, the tension was palpable. The Poth weren't just defending their outpost, they were preparing for something much bigger. And whatever that something was, Juno had no intention of sitting back and waiting to find out. "We'll have to move carefully," she said, her voice steady but carrying an edge of urgency. "Get us closer to the planet's surface, but keep us cloaked. I want to see what they're up to before we make any moves." Mason nodded, his fingers moving swiftly across the controls as the Valkyrie began its silent descent toward Vega 9. The ship's crew remained tense, each of them acutely aware that one mistake, one wrong move, could blow their cover and draw the full attention of the Poth fleet. Juno could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. They were playing a dangerous game, and if they misstepped, the consequences could be catastrophic. As the Valkyrie descended through Vega 9's upper atmosphere, the planet's surface came into sharper focus on the screen before them. What had once been a barren, rocky wasteland now housed a sprawling military base of metal and stone, nestled between jagged mountain ranges. The Poth forces moved in tight, disciplined formations, their tall insectoid bodies marching with unnerving mechanical precision. Massive cargo ships landed and took off at regular intervals, each one loaded with supplies, weapons, and fuel. It was clear that the Poth were preparing for a major offensive, but against whom? "They're definitely gearing up for something," Mason muttered as he reviewed the data feeds, his eyes scanning the tactical information flooding the screen. "We need to figure out what their next move is before they can act on it." Juno nodded, her mind racing. If the Poth launched an attack from Vega 9, they could easily strike at any number of nearby worlds, including human colonies. The Galactic Council might be content to let humanity be collateral damage in the larger conflict, but Juno wasn't. She had seen too much suffering in her lifetime to stand by and let it happen again. The Poth needed to be stopped before they unleashed whatever they were planning. "Send in the scout drones," she ordered, her voice firm. "I want a full scan of that base. Let's see what we're dealing with." Within moments, Mason deployed the drones, small, fast, and cloaked in invisibility. They zipped down to the surface, weaving through the jagged canyons and crags surrounding the Poth outpost. On the bridge of the Valkyrie, the holographic display flickered to life, revealing a detailed topographical map of the enemy base. The view sharpened as the drones fed back data, showing Poth weapons emplacements, shield generators, and guard rotations. But what drew Juno's attention most was the massive central command structure at the heart of the base, a towering fortress that pulsed with energy. "There," Juno said, pointing at the holographic display, her eyes narrowing in focus. "That command center is their nerve center. If we can take that out, we cripple their entire operation." Mason raised an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and concern crossing his face. "You're thinking about a surgical strike?" Juno nodded, her mind already working through the logistics. "Exactly. We send a small team down to the surface, infiltrate the base, and take out the command center. We hit them fast and hard, and then we get out before they know what hit them." It was a bold plan, but it was the only one that made sense. The Poth forces were too numerous and too well fortified for a direct assault. Engaging them in open combat would be suicide. But if they could take out the command structure from within, it would throw the entire Poth operation into chaos. Without their command center, the Poth forces would lose coordination, making them vulnerable to disruption and further strikes. Mason leaned back slightly, contemplating the plan. "It's risky. The Poth aren't just sitting around waiting for us to make a move. Their defenses are tight, and they've increased patrols since our last recon. One wrong move, and we'll be neck-deep in Poth soldiers." Juno didn't flinch. "I know the risks, Mason, but if we don't stop them now, they'll be free to launch an attack on any of the nearby colonies. They won't wait forever. We either strike now while we have the chance or sit back and watch them tear through our people." "I'm not going to let that happen." Mason studied her for a moment, then nodded, his expression resolute. "You're right. We have to act." Juno's eyes returned to the map as she began to outline the details of the operation. The Valkyrie would stay in orbit, cloaked and ready for a fast extraction. A small team, comprised of the ship's best operatives, would infiltrate the Poth base under the cover of darkness. Once inside, they would plant explosives at key points in the command center, disabling the Poth's communications and control systems. With the base in disarray, they would extract before the Poth could respond in force. It wasn't a perfect plan. There were risks, too many for Juno's liking, but it was the best option they had. The Poth were preparing for something massive, and time was running out. "We move at night," Juno said, finalizing the plan. "Prep the team. I want everyone ready to deploy in 2 hours." Mason gave a crisp nod before turning to relay the orders to the crew. Juno remained on the bridge, staring at the holographic display of the Poth base. This was it, the moment where they either stopped the Poth's advance or watched the war spread into human space. For too long, the galactic powers had underestimated humanity. Now, they were about to learn that humans weren't so easy to push aside. Not anymore. Despite its advanced technology, the Valkyrie wasn't built for full-scale battles against an entire fleet. Its strengths lay in speed and stealth, making it the perfect vessel for covert operations. But this mission was rapidly escalating into something far more dangerous. As her crew began preparing for the infiltration, Captain Juno Oren found herself pacing the bridge, mind racing through every possible outcome. She had led covert missions before, but this felt different. The Poth were ruthless, and if anything went wrong, there would be no mercy. The stakes were higher than ever. The war, which had so far skirted the edges of human space, was now looming ominously closer. This operation felt like their best, and perhaps only, chance to stop the storm before it consumed them all. Just then, Nia, the ship's lead engineer, approached. The wiry woman, sharp-featured and always focused, held a datapad in her hands, her expression tense. "Captain," Nia said, her voice low. "We found something strange in the drone scans." Juno stopped pacing and turned to face her, a frown creasing her brow. "What is it?" Nia tapped the screen of her datapad, and the holographic display flickered to life in the air between them. The image zoomed in on a section of the Poth base that had previously been hidden by the planet's jagged rock formations. Juno's eyes widened as the image sharpened. What they saw sent a chill down her spine. A massive weapon, unlike anything Juno had ever seen before, jutted out from the side of the mountain. Its long, spiked barrel, surrounded by thick armor plating and shimmering energy shields, was far larger than any conventional weapon the Poth had ever deployed. The scale was staggering, and the readings coming in from the drones showed that it wasn't fully operational yet, but the energy output was off the charts. "They're building a planet cracker," Nia said, her voice tight with disbelief. "If that thing goes online, they could wipe out entire worlds in a single shot." Juno's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a skirmish or a territorial dispute anymore. The Poth weren't merely staging for a battle, they were preparing for total war, and they had the firepower to shift the balance of the galaxy in their favor. "We have to destroy it," Juno said, her voice cold with conviction. "Forget the command center. That weapon is the real target. If we don't stop it, billions could die." Mason, who had been listening intently from the side, crossed his arms and studied the image with a grim expression. "That's going to be a hell of a lot harder to take down than the command center, Captain. It's heavily shielded, and we don't know what kind of defenses they have in place." He was right. The mission, already dangerous, had just become infinitely more complex. Taking down the Poth command center would have disrupted their operations, but this was a doomsday device. If they didn't stop it, the entire galaxy could fall under the shadow of Poth dominance. Juno's mind raced, adapting the plan on the fly. "We'll need to adjust our strategy," she said, her tone decisive. "But we're not leaving the system until that weapon is in pieces." Mason gave a sharp nod, his eyes hard with determination. "I'll get the infiltration team ready. We'll need to be fast and quiet. Any sign of us, and we're done." "Nia," Juno said, turning to the engineer, "I need you to work on a way to disable those shields. If we can't bring them down, there's no way we're getting close to that thing." Nia was already running calculations on her datapad, her fingers flying over the screen. "I'll need more data from the drones, but I think I can figure something out. If we can overload their power grid, we might be able to trigger a cascade failure in their shields. It'll be risky, though." "Everything about this is risky," Juno replied, her voice grim. "Do whatever you need to do. We don't have time to play it safe." The crew moved with purpose, every person focused on their task, but the weight of the mission pressed heavily on Juno's shoulders. The Poth had always been formidable enemies, but this planet cracker changed everything. They were no longer just fighting to protect human colonies, they were fighting to prevent galactic annihilation. Hours later, Juno crouched low behind a jagged outcrop of rocks, the howling winds of Vega 9 whipping around her, stinging her exposed skin with sharp grains of dust. The distant silhouette of the Poth base loomed large against the horizon, an angular fortress half buried in the mountainside. At its heart, the massive structure housing the planet cracker pulsed with dark energy, the air around it vibrating with a sense of malevolent power. It was like a sleeping giant, a weapon of unimaginable destruction, just waiting to be unleashed. Beside her, Mason was tightening the straps on his tactical gear, his expression grim but focused. "We're about to wake the beast, Captain," he said in a low voice. "You sure we can take this thing down?" Juno glanced at him, her eyes hard. "We don't have a choice, Mason. We have to stop it. No matter what." The infiltration team, camouflaged in sleek armor designed to blend into the rocky terrain, was positioned at the edge of the facility. They were some of the best operatives in Earth's independent peacekeeping force, former soldiers, hackers, and engineers who had faced impossible odds before. But even they knew the risks they were about to face. One wrong move, one slip, and the entire Poth base would come down on them like a hammer. Juno signaled to Nia, who was crouched a few feet away, monitoring the shield systems. "How's it looking?" Nia's fingers danced over her datapad, her eyes never leaving the screen. "I found a weak point in their power grid. If I can overload it, the shields will go down, but only for a few minutes. You'll have to be fast." "Fast is what we do," Juno said, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. She turned to Mason and the rest of the team. "Once those shields drop, we go in, plant the charges, and get out. No heroics. This is about destroying that weapon and getting home." Mason gave a tight nod. "We're ready, Captain." Juno's heart pounded in her chest as she gave the final order. The shields flickered, then dropped. This was it. The mission had begun, and there was no turning back. They were going to stop the Potha's planet cracker, or die trying. Juno's jaw clenched. They didn't have a choice. If that weapon went online, it would spell the end for entire human colonies, their last line of defense stripped away. She glanced around at her team, each member as tense as she was, yet their eyes burned with unwavering determination. These were soldiers who understood the stakes, who knew the gravity of what they were facing. Sergeant Alt, a grizzled veteran with scars that told 1,000 stories, checked the charge on his plasma rifle. Meanwhile, Nia, their resourceful engineer, adjusted her equipment for the infiltration. Their mission was clear: destroy the planet cracker before it could unleash its devastation. The faint echoes of Poth soldiers moving through the facility drifted through the air, adding to the tension in Juno's chest. Every second counted. "Okay," she whispered into her comm unit. "Nia, are the shields down?" Nia tapped at the small device in her hand, her fingers flying with rapid precision. "Almost there. Just a few more seconds." She paused, her brow furrowed in concentration, then nodded sharply. "Got it. Shields are down." Juno exhaled, her pulse quickening. "All right, team, we're going in. Remember the plan. Get in, plant the charges, and get out before they know we're here. We can't afford to get bogged down in a firefight." The team moved as one, slipping through the shadows toward the base's exterior. The Poth were meticulous in their patrols, but the Valkyrie S-drones had mapped out a narrow window of opportunity, just enough time to breach the facility before reinforcements could arrive. Juno led the way, her steps light yet purposeful, her mind focused solely on the mission. When they reached the base's outer wall, Nia immediately went to work on the access panel. Juno kept watch, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Mason stood beside her, his breath steady, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "Almost got it," Nia muttered, sparks flying from the panel as she worked. After a tense moment, there was a soft click, and the massive door hissed open. "Go." Juno motioned for the team to move, and they slipped inside the base, their boots making barely a sound on the cold metal floors. The interior was as intimidating as the exterior. Sleek, industrial corridors lined with alien technology hummed with power, and the air was thick with the scent of coolant and machinery. Juno felt a knot form in her stomach as they neared the core of the base. She knew what awaited them: the planet cracker, a weapon of unimaginable destruction. If the Poth completed it, humanity's fragile position in the galaxy would be shattered beyond repair. They rounded the final corner and entered a cavernous chamber, the centerpiece of the Poth operation. The planet cracker towered above them, its spiked barrel extending through the mountain, its base connected to an intricate web of control panels, fuel lines, and energy conduits. The sheer size of the weapon was overwhelming, and it made it clear that no one would survive its firing. "Wow," Mason let out a low whistle. "That's a whole lot of boom, Captain." Juno swallowed hard. "Let's make sure it never gets used." Nia moved swiftly, setting up charges at critical junctures of the weapon's support structure. 5 minutes should be enough to fry their systems and collapse the whole thing, she said, her voice tight with concentration. But just as they prepared to move further, a piercing alarm blared through the chamber, cutting through the heavy tension like a knife. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an ominous glow as the sound of heavy boots echoed through the corridors. "Damn it!" Juno cursed under her breath. "They must have realized the shields are down." "Captain, we need to hurry," Mason urged, his eyes dotting around for any sign of reinforcements. Juno nodded, her mind racing. "Nia, finish setting the charges. Mason, get the perimeter. We need to buy her time." Nia's fingers flew as she worked, her concentration laser-focused on the task at hand. Each charge needed to be perfectly placed. Even a moment's hesitation could lead to disaster. Juno and Mason moved to the entrance, keeping their eyes peeled for any approaching guards. The blaring alarm intensified, and through the chaos, Juno felt her heartbeat synchronize with the wailing sound. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on borrowed time. "Almost done," Nia shouted, her voice strained. Come on, Juno whispered to herself, willing the seconds to stretch. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to taste. A group of Poth soldiers appeared down the corridor, their insectoid forms silhouetted in the red light. Juno raised her weapon, aiming carefully. "Get ready!" The Poth soldiers advanced, their movements quick and precise. Juno squeezed the trigger, sending a pulse of energy toward the first soldier. The shot hit true, and the creature crumpled to the ground. Mason joined her, returning fire as the other soldiers scattered, taking cover. "No!" Nia shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos. Juno turned just in time to see Nia stepping back from the last charge. "Charges set," she declared, her voice a mix of relief and urgency. "Let's move," Juno ordered, gesturing for Nia to join them. They fell back toward the exit, adrenaline pumping through their veins. But as they turned to flee, the ground shook beneath them, and the ceiling began to rumble ominously. "Collapse in progress," Nia yelled, glancing back at the planet cracker. "We need to get out of here now." They sprinted through the corridors, the alarms still blaring, the sounds of battle ringing in their ears. The base trembled with every step they took, debris beginning to fall from the walls. They had to make it out before the entire structure collapsed around them. As they raced toward the exit, Juno felt a surge of hope. They had done it. They had set the charges that would end the threat of the planet cracker. But that hope was quickly overshadowed by the reality of the situation. They weren't out of danger yet. "Faster," Juno urged, her heart pounding in her chest. They rounded another corner, the exit just ahead. But as they approached, the door slammed shut with a deafening clang. "No!" Juno shouted, her panic rising. "Back! We need to find another way out!" Mason yelled, turning on his heel. The walls shook violently as the planet cracker began to destabilize. Juno's mind raced, searching for a solution. "The maintenance tunnels," she exclaimed. "They should be nearby. If we can reach them, we might still make it." "Lead the way," Mason called out, and Juno sprinted toward the nearest access hatch, hoping it would lead them to safety. With Nia and Mason close behind, Juno pried open the hatch and ducked inside. They were plunged into darkness, the air stale and heavy. Juno activated her helmet's flashlight, casting a beam of light down the narrow tunnel. "Stay close," she urged, and they began to move through the cramped space. The walls shuddered as the base continued to implode behind them, but they pressed on, driven by the need to survive. As they navigated the twisting passages, Juno couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time. They had done their part, but the mission was far from over. They needed to escape, regroup, and warn Earth before it was too late. With every step, the stakes grew higher, but Juno refused to let fear paralyze her. They would find a way out, together. Juno's heart skipped a beat. The Poth had detected them. "Damn it!" Mason hissed, drawing his weapon. "They're onto us." Within moments, the walls of the chamber erupted, and Poth soldiers poured in, their insectoid forms moving with terrifying speed. The air was filled with the whine of energy weapons powering up and the chittering war cries of the enemy, creating a chaotic symphony of impending doom. "Hold them off!" Juno shouted, raising her plasma rifle and firing into the advancing ranks. Blue energy bolts flew from her weapon, striking the nearest Poth and sending it crashing to the floor. The firefight erupted into chaos. Juno's team fought fiercely, their weapons blazing as they held their ground, but the Poth kept coming, wave after wave. The tension in the room was palpable, the charges were set, but time was running out, and escape was looking more impossible by the second. "Mason, cover me!" Juno shouted, her voice barely audible over the din of battle. Mason took up a position beside Nia, firing at anything that moved while she worked to finish setting the final charges. The air crackled with energy and danger, every second bringing more enemies flooding in, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. Then, with a thunderous stomp, a Poth general strode into the room. He was a towering figure, clad in gleaming chitinous armor that reflected the chaotic light of the battle. His burning yellow eyes locked onto Juno, sending a ripple of fear through her team. With a slow, deliberate motion, he drew a long, wicked blade from his side. "You dare challenge us here, human," the general hissed, his voice a low growl that reverberated through the chaos. Juno met his gaze, her grip tightening on her rifle. "We're not just challenging you, we're stopping you," she declared, her voice unwavering despite the fear racing through her veins. The general's lips curled into a snarl, a grotesque twist of his features that only fueled her resolve. With a speed that belied his size, he lunged toward her. Juno barely had time to react, raising her rifle to block the blow. The force of the impact sent her stumbling back, but she held her ground, refusing to be overpowered. "I've fought your kind before," the general hissed, swinging his blade in a deadly arc. "You are weak. You are fragile." Juno ducked under the strike, rolling to the side and firing her weapon at close range. The shot hit the general in the chest, staggering him momentarily, but he didn't fall. His armor was too strong, and he came at her again, relentless in his pursuit. Juno could feel her heart racing, the weight of her situation crashing down around her. She knew she couldn't hold him off forever. Just then, Nia's voice crackled through the comms. "Charges are set. We've got 2 minutes to get out of here. Fall back." Juno shouted to her team, dodging another strike from the general. "We're done here." With a final, desperate burst of energy, Juno fired a shot into the ceiling above the general, bringing down a cascade of debris between them. It wouldn't hold him for long, but it gave them the window they needed. "Go!" Juno shouted, and the team sprinted back through the corridor, their feet pounding against the metal floor. The sounds of both forces closing in behind them added a sense of urgency to their escape. Explosions echoed in the distance as the charges began to detonate, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Juno's mind raced as they navigated the twisting corridors, every instinct telling her to keep moving. They burst out of the base and into the open air just as the final explosion rocked the facility. The planet cracker collapsed in a fiery inferno, sending a massive shockwave through the atmosphere. Juno glanced back at the smoking ruin, her chest heaving as a wave of relief washed over her. They had done it. The Potha's unstoppable force had been stopped, at least for now. But as she turned to regroup with her team, the reality of their situation settled heavily on her shoulders. She knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was still teetering on the edge of chaos, and the Poth would undoubtedly return, more determined than ever. "Everyone okay?" Juno called, her voice hoarse but steady. She needed to ensure her team was intact, to count heads in the wake of their narrow escape. Mason nodded, his expression grim yet relieved, while Nia gave a shaky thumbs up, her eyes wide with adrenaline and disbelief. Sergeant Alt stood a bit to the side, his demeanor calm but vigilant, a reminder that the danger was far from over. "Let's regroup and assess our next steps," Juno instructed, her mind already racing ahead. "We need to get back to the Valkyrie and report what we've found. The Galactic Council needs to know about the Potha's plans and this weapon. We can't let our guard down." As they made their way toward their ship, Juno couldn't shake the lingering unease that settled in her gut. Despite their victory, a feeling of dread loomed over her like a dark cloud. She had fought against the Poth before, but this was different. They were evolving, preparing for a war that could engulf the entire galaxy. If they were to have any hope of stopping the Poth from unleashing their fury, they needed to act decisively and quickly. They boarded the Valkyrie, the familiar hum of its systems providing a momentary sense of safety. Juno took a deep breath, her mind focusing on the task ahead. The bridge was a flurry of activity as the crew initiated the launch sequence, ready to leave the planet behind. "Status report," Juno commanded as she settled into her seat, her heart still racing from the recent battle. "Charges detonated successfully," Mason reported, his eyes fixed on the screens as they showed the destruction of the Poth facility. "We've got a clear path for departure, but we'll need to move fast. The Poth will be on high alert now." "Understood," Juno replied, her mind racing. "Set course for the nearest Council outpost. We need to relay our intel and prepare for whatever comes next." As the ship lifted off, Juno couldn't help but glance back at the smoldering ruins of the planet cracker. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The galaxy was still on the brink, and Juno knew they had to stay one step ahead of the Poth if they wanted to protect humanity and all it held dear. For now, they had achieved the impossible, but the reality of their situation pressed heavily upon her. They would prepare for the storm that was surely on the horizon, a storm that would test the limits of their strength and resolve. The fight against the Poth had just begun, and Juno was determined to see it through, no matter the cost.